Welcome, pod listeners, to episode, I believe it is 4 of Office Hours with Karpf and Loge, where we offer strategic communication and hot takes with footnotes. I'm Professor Peter Loge, an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University and a strategic communications consultant. And as always, I'm joined by my smarter, hipper colleague,
Dave Karp, also a professor at the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. It's office hours and it's the end of the semester. So you listeners probably want to know, can you have an extension on your paper?
No.
Yes.
No, you may not.
Yes, you can.
Great. Not in my class. If you want to turn something in late for Dave, you go. You do your thing.
I informed my students that if they want extensions, the important thing that they do is that they request one. It's fine.
No, there's all caps. No. We're moving on. You're wearing a new Mountain Goats t-shirt, Dave. I want to highlight the Mountain Goats t-shirt.
Well, not a new Mountain Goats t-shirt, but definitely one of my best.
New to us.
Daughters refer to this as the owl t-shirt. But yeah, it's definitely one of my top 4 Mountain Goats t-shirts. It's the podcast with Karpf and Loge, where we talk a lot about what I'm dressed is, because as we all know, podcasting is a visual medium.
And it can be on peterloge.com/podcasts, where that's also where I put links to the footnotes. If you want to know how we're backing up the garbage we're spewing, we got data, we got links.
We do have data, and we have a reason to still have websites in the year of our Lord 2022.
Yep, hang on to that, Mr. Substack, really a blog. All right, what are we doing? I do want to say our producer last week we went with gloom and doom instead of predictions. Our producer said that doom was funny, but predictions are better, which we'll get to at the end. But that sadly means I can't talk about the Joy Division Teletubbies video mashup that I will now be putting in the links on peterloge.com/podcast. Oh, you will love it. It's disturbing for so many reasons.
I just want to give a note to all of our audio listeners out there. Don't click that link.
Love me some Joy Division. All right. What do we got going on? You want to talk about, we're recording on a Friday, and specifically Friday,
April 22nd, also known as Earth Day.
And in addition, April 22nd is National Beagle Day, National Jelly Bean Day. Pod drops on a Tuesday. This coming Tuesday, it's National Audubon Day, which is really on brand. National Richter Scale Day, National Dissertation Day. No, you may not get an extension. Sunday, Hug a Plumber Day. So hug a plumber ask permission first. The 24th, National Pigs in a Blanket Day. And then finally, the 23rd is Talk Like Shakespeare Day and Record Store Day. So we got a lot of days going on, Dave. Why Earth
yesterday was John Muir's birthday. The day before Earth Day is the birthday of the founder of the Sierra Club. I know all of our listeners definitely care about that, as do I.
We got a lot of days going on. So Earth Day matters. How and why does it matter in 2022?
Well, you told me that you had a rant about this, and I'm very curious why Peter Loge is the one who wants to rant about Earth Day. Get into it, and then I'll tell you why you're probably right.
So
we'll
I've got actually, I have, you and I are both very fond of assigning a terrific piece from the Stanford Social Innovation Review called Stop Raising Awareness Already, and a risk of days like National Richter Scale Days. I don't know what to do that. April is Stress Awareness Month, so be aware you're stressed. Earth Day is a bit different though, right? So Earth Day, there's actually stuff to do. So let's talk about actually how Earth Day is using the day strategically rather than just sort of performatively, and then we'll get to the ranting bit.
So I've actually always been an Earth Day critic. And I'm not a critic of the original Earth Day. The original Earth Day was a nationwide teach-in that did some real work. What I'm a critic of, and this goes back to my college days actually, there is a habit amongst particularly younger activist groups, grassroots groups, of planning their spring around, well, Earth Day is going to be in late spring, so we have to do something around that. And then their plan for the semester ends up not being about campaigns for political change or environmental change, but instead, let's plan some event. which falls under the bucket of awareness raising. I spent 6 years on the Sierra Club board. I did find it funny while I was on the Sierra Club board. I had two colleagues who were not married to each other, but they both had anniversaries on April 22nd. They were both married on April 22nd. And I asked both of them individually at some point, like, why did you get married on Earth Day? And the answer from both of them was, oh, we didn't know it was Earth Day. And that really tells you something, that if you are a serious organization committed to robust campaigns for change, Earth Day is mostly a distraction. Now, that's not to say, and the best thing that you can do it now, there's a climate strike tomorrow. Like, there's going to be a big event tomorrow that matters. Earth Day is a fine thing to loop it to, but besides that, I mean, you could have that some other time. It doesn't have to be in April. So it's a moment to raise some money. It's a moment when journalists who still work at newspapers are going to get invited by their editor to write an environmental story. So you can try to make that the best story you can. It's a moment when, like, NBC is going to do Green Week. So if people are still watching NBC, you can try to do a little something with that window. Like, it's not nothing. But it can so easily be the thing that you plan for instead of the thing that you plan into your real work. And that has, I think, often weighed the environmental movement down. I think we are often worse off because we start with this thing on the calendar and you plan for the thing instead of planning for the campaign and for your targets and for your goals. So I always spend Earth Day annoyed.
I think that's right about many days on the calendar, right? Well, we got a day, you got a day. And I've been involved in a lot of organizations that say, well, Congress declared a day, we got an official day, as if that sort of matters and makes things automatically happen. A day is a good excuse to have the conversation. You know, why should I care about the environment? Well, it's Earth Day. Oh, okay, now it's Earth Day. Now you've got my attention. Now do something with it. Major League Soccer, for example, is doing stuff around Earth Day, and they're getting their teams and volunteers to, clean rivers and do sort of good environmental stuff. That's a good, because you're using the day to accomplish a thing. It's a little bit of showing off, but whatever, that doesn't matter. Good things are happening. Right. It's also the case, there's a study that, again, I'll link to, that found that they looked at Earth Day events and Earth Day in areas where it rained and didn't rain. And the argument being, if there's an event and it's raining, fewer people are going to go.
Sure.
Right. And they found that Earth Day events in areas where it didn't rain, so the crowds were presumably bigger, people were more environmentally aware, more environmentally conscious, and behaved in sort of more pro-climate ways than not. So actually being a part of the conversation, awareness raising may have in fact helped. But to your point, it's only if you then do something about it, right? It's not a, hey, Earth Day, I'm going to put a green Earth logo on my social media thing. It's what do you do about it that matters. Now, one of my complaints about, and this is my rant, one of my complaints about environmental communication in general, climate communication, is it tends to be, we're all going to die. Everybody, we are doomed. Therefore, drive a Prius. And I got to tell you, if the seas are going to rise and the earth is going to boil, I am not driving a low-powered, ugly little sedan that mostly says, I would vote for Bernie Sanders, but I'm afraid of the taxes on my second home going up, right? If we are doomed and, Armageddon is coming, I'm buying an SUV, a huge truck, big enough with a gun turret, so I can fend off all these roaming bands of Prius drivers looking for their free-range kale and cruelty-free, gluten-free quinoa pancakes. There's got to be some level of optimism, right? You've got to say
I'm going to yell at you on two things there. First of all, you would not fire a gun at anyone. You would throw copies of Aristotle at them.
Those are big and heavy. The hardback
They are
versions,
big and heavy, but let's not pretend that you wouldn't approach Armageddon as a political philosopher, because I think that a lot of our audience has met you, sir. So I co-authored a paper at Midwest Political Science Association, actually just before our episode 3. And that paper was on what we call the personal responsibility frame. I want to push you on the second half of that formulation.
Okay.
Because while you're right that it can't all be doom and gloom, and there has been research on that, I think Hari Han is one of the scholars who's done work on that. It's true that it can't all be doom and gloom because that's demobilizing. If the and now what is buy a Prius, like take personal responsibility to make the world better. That also sucks. And our paper is actually it's a study of when the personal responsibility frame became the strategic choice that the environmental movement was making. I don't want to spoil the paper because it still needs to go under review, but it looks like the mid 1980s. It looks like after Congress polarized on environmental issues, the environmental movement stopped saying the solution here is to pressure Congress or the solution here is to pressure corporations, and instead started saying the solution here is just to make different choices in your own life. Of course, it's disempowering to say the sky is falling, so hide inside or build your own roof a little different. Like, of course, that's disempowering. I think it is difficult in the year of our Lord 2022 to be honest about where we are with climate without being depressing. But that also means that what we need probably is some honest outrage, that we have been doing so poorly and we've been waiting for so long to handle this stuff later. Later has to become now, and the people in charge of it need to be the people with power. It can't just be on each of us individually anymore.
But I think you hit a couple of things, right? The problem has to be big enough to matter and small enough to solve, right? If it's huge and unsolvable, I'm not going to think about it.
Mhm.
And if it's too little, I'll solve it, but like, who cares, right? An example I used to use is that one day the earth is going to fall into the sun and my dry cleaner closes at 7. I spend no time at all thinking about the former. Earth's going to fall in the sun, we're toast. But I really desperately need that clean shirt for that meeting because I'm not going to get outshirted by Dave and his mountain goats, right? It's a problem that matters to me and it's one I can solve. So the problem has to matter and the solution has to be commensurate to the problem, right? So I think personal responsibility helps. Yes, get LED lights or something in addition to, federal legislation, in addition to outrage. But if it's all just outrage, that's exhausting and it's doomsaying and won't work. So
again, you're right that the mix of messages have to include a meaningful thing that people can do that gives them hope. First of all, a better solution to the dry cleaner is I'll just buy you some Mountain Goats t-shirts. You don't need to dry clean these. And that way you'll have better taste in music than you have so far. But
because if I wear this shirt, I'll like the record. That's a weird.
You'll like the record anyway, because I know you have at least some taste. But again, the challenge here on climate is the decision to tell people that the solution is stuff that they can handle in their own lives, that they can have something tactile that they can do, ends up feeling like a lie to them because it kind of is. And also ends up in the longer term feeling disempowering because that's a gift to people in actual power who are going to insist on not doing anything that makes themselves feel uncomfortable unless you make them. Now, how do you do that? Like, what mix of that do you have? You need to be honest and clear in what the stakes are without massively overblowing it. But actually there's some arguments for strategically overblowing it that we can talk about at some other point. There's a great book on this called The Bet about the 1970s environmental movement. But that can be for a different day because we got a lot to cover. We haven't even talked about Elon Musk yet. And I'm mad at him. So we can save that for another time, but that decision to figure out how to frame up the real stakes and then also point people towards meaningful actions that hold the power structure accountable instead of actions that just feel good. It requires some artistry, but also I can't think of a more important thing for advocates to get right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has to be a yes and. That's my only point is like, if I'm going to die anyway, don't tell me to change my light bulb because I simply don't believe you. Tell me
if
to
you're going
change
to die
my
anyway, then I'm going to tell you to throw a book of Aristotle at Joe Manchin. At the very least, you can get a nice solid thunk in before we all go down in flames.
I will make a note.
Fair enough.
You're Senator Manchin. I will. All right. I'm going to change the subject.
First. What's that?
Binding first. Hardback copy. No ebook.
No ebook.
That'd be a fun gift though. People throwing virtual books at people.
I think a more fun gift is when I send you a bunch of Mountain Goats t-shirts so you can finally trust better.
Moving on.
All right, going back into
it. Speaking of Disneyland, Disney World, Orlando, there's been a bit of a kerfuffle in the happiest place on earth. The happiest tax haven on earth is apparently there's a kerfuffle, Dave. You opined on the kerfuffle on the Twitter.
I had a lot of things to say on the Twitter. Yeah, so Republicans in the state of Florida have decided not only do they want to win the culture war, but they also want Disney to be enemy one, which is an interesting choice because that way my family gets Frozen and Encanto, and they get, I don't know, maybe Coco Melon. Oof, oof. Enjoy that, Republican families. I was a little surprised by this because my students actually raised this with me in class. And what I told them is primarily what's going on here is Ron DeSantis wants to raise his national profile so that if Trump doesn't win, he can be the next guy. And that means picking big fights that can be on Tucker Carlson all the time. And saying a lot of stuff about how you're going to hold Disney accountable for being the woke corporation that didn't like the Don't Say Gay bill, that perfectly fits the profile for his goal. But what I told my students was that means that they're going to talk about this a lot. They're not going to like vote on the damn bill because that would be the dumbest thing ever. And then yesterday, it turns out, no, they're going to hold a special session so that they can at least claim to vote on the damn bill, which is just proof once again that it can always get dumber. So what stupid times we live in.
Yeah, profoundly. So a couple of things. I've done some research because I prepped for these. I know you put a lot of thought into the Mountain Goats t-shirts. I don't want to diminish your Mountain Goat t-shirt.
You poor bastard. People are getting from me the unedited truth.
Unedited truth.
I'm shooting from the hip, baby.
All right. So a couple of things. First of all, Disney has long been a popular vacation with the LGBTQI plus community. There are gay days every year in Orlando. They're coming up end of May, beginning of June this year. I did some quick research. The gay days is expected to draw 50,000 people to Disney World. The average couple at Disney World spends between $1,900 and $2,800. So they're not all 50,000 aren't in couples, but the math is easy. So 25,000 couples conservatively is $25 million over a few days in Orlando. So Disney is not turning its back on this massive constituency and this ringing cash register.
Yeah, who knew that the gays liked Disney? Oh, right, actually, pretty much everyone.
Pretty much everybody.
Yeah,
right. Like we fought
not a secret.
Can gays go to Disneyland battle years and years ago, and of course you give them gay days because one, you got a bunch of people with a bunch of money who want to come ride a bunch of rides, and they're not little children who will be throwing up, peeing on things. These are grown-ups who will be throwing up and peeing on things, and that's a different thing. What I think that Disney is doing from a strategic communications perspective, what I think is interesting, I'm assuming Disney is at least partially behind it, is DeSantis is framing this as sort of the Tucker Carlson moral outrage, really unlike Donald Trump without all of the corruption of venality, but just enough so you like me. Disney isn't fighting that. Disney isn't saying love is love, any of that. What they're saying is, if this bill passes, the state of Florida, it will be cutting Disney's tax bill by hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and passing that tax burden on to homeowners. Because of the way the tax structure works in Florida, it would be property taxes. So thousands of dollars more a year in property taxes to people who live in the areas owned by Disney because a Republican governor decided he wanted to pick a fight with a pretend mouse.
So let me actually take the other side of it for a sec, because there's one piece of this which on a grand scale, I have to admit, kind of works in Republicans' favor here. And that is the Republicans in Florida at the state level who want to be national level people, which is definitely DeSantis, but is also probably every state legislator. Like they've all got to be looking at Matt Gaetz and thinking, if that guy can do it, I can do it. Because, hey, I'm not sleeping with teenagers. Or I don't know how many of them are sleeping with teenagers. They're Florida elected Republicans. I haven't investigated that. But the point is, the thing that goes well for them here is they very much want the fight. And Disney doesn't, right? Like Disney wants to continue to be the company that has a theme park that everyone goes to and has the most popular cultural brand in the world. And, you know, there's that old saying from Michael Jordan when he didn't want to get into politics because he said Republicans buy shoes too. Like Republicans buy Disney Plus too. And also, there's at least one executive at Disney. I think it's Ike Perlmutter, the guy who runs Marvel. He's a Mar-a-Lago regular. Like, there's probably other Disney executives who are Trumpist Republicans. So I'm sure that they hate that this fight is going on, which means that they're going to spend the entire time not punching back, but instead switching the frame and saying things like, that's a bad bill to pass because think about your taxes. But that means that they can basically, like, Republicans are going to be able to basically ring up a whole bunch of culture war points without ever worrying that one of the most profitable corporations on earth decides to make their lives hell, because that corporation isn't going to want to make their lives hell. It's just going to want them to knock it off already.
No, I think that's right. And I also don't think Disney is going to be the one saying it's a tax hike on homeowners. What they're doing is getting other people to point out that's what's going on.
Right.
And that's some of the framing, not just nationally, you're seeing that New York Times, Vanity Fair, but also local Florida outlets are reporting that this is a local tax hike. Yeah. And part of that, I'm sure, is because you've got good, smart journalists in Florida. There are a number of them. But I'm sure it's also somebody going, hey, by the way, here's some unintended consequences of that. Disney, I couldn't agree more, just wants this to go away. Right. They've got no interest in the fight. But I do think that as a strategic matter, making it about taxes rather than anything else is just very smart strategic communications. One person I'd love to hear from in all of this debate, and I checked his Twitter feed this morning and wasn't there, is Carl Heisen. Mm-hmm. Hilarious author, Floridian, who hates Disney. Wrote a fantastic book just attacking Disney, but also hates DeSantis and the Republicans and hates developers. So I'm dying for Carl Heisen. Carl Heisen, if you're a regular or occasional listener,
don't call us. His hand to the phone.
Don't call us. Tweet at us.
Again, since it's a podcast, I should just narrate what Peter Loge is doing right now. Again, I do think there's also a strategic lesson here that if you're going to pick a fight with a bigger enemy, make it an enemy that is going to have no interest in fighting back. You can ring up a bunch of cheap score points. It cheapens politics. I don't think it's good for democracy. But at a strategic level, like, I get why if you're a Republican and what you really want is national attention, this isn't the worst target that you could pick.
Right. And it's also the case, I think you were saying, might have been before we started recording, that this may not actually become law. And if it does become law, it might be so chock full of loopholes, it doesn't matter. This is about the theater of the fight, not the effect of the policy.
Yeah. Yeah. I even though they're holding a special session, I will be surprised if it passes. Because I think we don't live in a world that is quite so dumb that Florida Republicans decide to raise property taxes for a cheap points against the biggest corporation. I think they just want the headlines. Then again, there's one thing that the world keeps on doing. It's showing me that it is in fact dumber than I thought it was, which I think could bring us to Elon Musk if we want to go there.
You've been talking to Elon. You got beef. I don't know. Did you go to the same summer camp and he was mean to you? Do we need to?
Clearly I didn't, because I went to public school. And Elon Musk was raised by a diamond miner in South Africa before he came here and made his millions. We come from different social classes, he and I. I guess part of my beef is that I like Twitter, and finding out that the world's richest man has decided that he should just own Twitter outright because he likes it too. That on its own is a little annoying. But yeah, so Elon Musk has had this like 2-week saga now where he woke up one day and decided he would buy 10% of Twitter and submitted paperwork saying that he was a passive investor. And then a few days later, changed that paperwork to say he was going to join their board. He saved himself like $150 million by submitting that paperwork wrong, because of course he did. And then they had like a week where their board was saying, hey, it's great, he's going to join our board. We swear we're excited about this. And then I think he realized that being an actual fiduciary of Twitter, which means that you have to have the company's interest in mind when you're tweeting, wasn't actually a like fun gag. So then he announced, no, never mind, I'm not going to do it. And then a few days later, last Thursday, he announced, no, you know what, I'm just going to buy the whole thing and take it private. He did this before he went on the TED stage. And the first thing he said when Chris Anderson, the head of TED, asked him, why are you doing this? He said, well, because I think Twitter is the public square. And it really says something about the world that we live in, that the world's richest man can say, I think that is the public square, ergo, let me buy it now, so it's mine. Everything about this is annoying, including the fact that Elon Musk clearly will ruin Twitter, not because people will leave an outrage, but just because all of his ideas are low-key terrible and will make it less of a fun place to be. Like his idea is just don't ban people, except ban bots. I don't know how that'll work. Just let people say whatever they want. I don't know how to make money off of this. Who cares? Like, it is not necessarily the case that Twitter will stay a place that people want to congregate. MySpace died after Rupert Murdoch bought it. Tumblr pretty much died after, what was it? I think it was Yahoo bought it. Like, these sites rely on their community, and Elon Musk will ruin a thing that I like because he has too much money and wants to goof off with it. He should just leave it alone and find a different hobby.
So if that's the case, if your examples of Tumblr or MySpace are accurate, then won't somebody else just move into the space the way Facebook did, or the way whatever followed Tumblr moved into Tumblr?
Well, that's like nothing particularly followed Tumblr. And like other things have absorbed some of that, including Twitter. It's not that we won't have online communities anymore. Like, people will go someplace, but it's also not necessarily the case that that place will be as good. Like, we shouldn't. This cues up. I'm giving a TEDx talk on campus tomorrow about the digital future and whether the digital future will be any better than the present. We shouldn't assume that whatever comes next is as good or better than what we have now. Twitter's not perfect, but what would replace it after Elon takes over? Probably a downgrade.
So when Dave says he's giving a talk tomorrow, those of you listening to this, that meant several days ago. It will have been a great talk.
It will have been an excellent talk that happened several days before this posted. Check TEDx. It's probably available on the web somewhere. Yeah.
We'll actually, if only I had a website and we could put up a link. All right.
Oh, yeah. You can put it on the website. Sure.
So Elon Musk, the Elon Musk grant. I'm with you on Elon Musk. It's also Republicans are raising money off of it. Republicans are sending a fundraising email saying Elon Musk is going to save the right because he's going to allow more crazy, irresponsible people to behave in crazy, irresponsible ways, which I'm really not sure we need more of at this point. All right, we're coming up on half.
That was the thing that Twitter needed to fix itself. Then Truth Social and Rumble and Gab and all those other attempts to build a right-wing Twitter wouldn't be doing as terribly as they are. Twitter's problem is not too much content moderation. Dear Lord.
And it's certainly not like Twitter isn't thriving because of all the politics. There's very little politics on Twitter. Most of the politics on Twitter does come from a handful of people who tend to be liberal Democrats. Mercifully, most of Twitter is.
There are actually plenty of conservatives yelling on Twitter as well and trolling.
Right, but statistically, if you just look at who's on Twitter and what they're saying, it tends to be. If you look at Pew's numbers on this, mercifully, most of Twitter is not politics. It's people yelling about sports and other much more fun things to yell about. All right, we're coming up on 30 minutes, which, as we know, is the perfect length for a dog walk. So we're looking ahead. We're looking because the producer said I shouldn't talk about doom things like the Joy Division Teletubbies mashup video that will be linked to on the website. What are you? I love that video. What are you looking for in the coming weeks, Professor Dave Karpf?
I think 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be yelling about Elon and Twitter because the next chapter of the takeover attempt is going to be constructed on the fly over these next 2 weeks. That's not going to be the entire national conversation, but that's going to be a thing that ends up annoying me and leading me to tweet. I also think we're going to see some more culture warring with Republicans going on offense, trying to find more gay teens and trans teens to harass, and or more women whose bodies they want to control. So I think we're gonna have a lot of that, and at the same time, we're gonna have Democrats at the national level continuing to decide that we should just talk about kitchen table issues instead of actually engaging with the things that are trending on social media and getting all the attention. Though maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Democrats will finally take a lesson from there was that state rep in Michigan, who finally kicked back and everyone is paying attention to now. Well, we can put a link in the show notes to her speech. But her opponent, like one of the Republicans in the legislature, tried to fundraise off of calling her a groomer, and she was like, "I'm a cis white suburban mom. What are you talking about?" And like actually fought back for her values. It would be great if in 2 weeks we're noticing that Democrats are actually fighting back on that front and framing the issue and talking about their values. But my guess is that'll be a little more annoying in 2 weeks because that won't have happened.
All right, I want to note that you just put in a plug for the website, having mocked it. So if you could, Peter,
lots of things that I mock because I mock all things.
That's fair. That's fair. I do want to point out, though, in addition to the next culture war battle that we see brewing is one DeSantis has already picked, which is apparently math books, which I don't know, are somehow anti whatever it is Ron DeSantis believes in. I don't know. The math book ban is baffling. All right. So here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, coming up in the next couple of weeks, are potential Senate confirmation votes. One for the Federal Trade Commission, Alvaro Bedoya, and one for the Federal Communications Commission, Gigi Sohn. Mm-hmm. So the first one, Bedoya is a lawyer, he's a well-respected lawyer, he's at Georgetown. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and others oppose him, not because of him, but because it would give the chair of the FTC, Lena Khan, control of the FTC, and she very much wants to push antitrust, especially against social and digital media and big tech companies. Mm-hmm. And conservatives are really concerned about that. So they're holding up Bedoya because of Khan, not because of Bedoya. On the other hand, the Federal Communications Commission is holding up Gigi Sohn, a known telecommunications activist. The argument against her being pushed in part by a PAC being run by former Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp to the tune of $200,000 social media buy is saying that Sohn doesn't care about rural broadband. Mm-hmm. I think the real stakes here are net neutrality, because she would come out very strongly in favor of net neutrality, as she has done throughout her career. She was CEO and co-founder of Public Knowledge, for example. And I think that if I were the progressives, a lot of my progressive friends are very angry that President Biden isn't giving a magical speech to fix the world and issuing executive orders that are legally and constitutionally questionable and probably bad for the presidency. And they're not paying nearly enough attention to his nominees, some of whom are super progressive, doing a lot of things progressives have been working for a long time, like net neutrality. I would be surprised if Gigi Sohn's, I'm almost certainly mispronouncing her last name, which is unfortunate because we've met on several occasions. I'd be surprised if she gets a vote, and I wouldn't be surprised if her nomination were withdrawn. It's just not, I don't think, it's got to be 50 and you got to get all the Dems. And if you got a moderate Democratic former senator running a $200,000 buy against you, it's not hard to see where she would lose a couple of Dems in the Senate.
Yes, I want to point out two things on this. First, Elizabeth Warren likes to say that personnel is political. She's right. And that we now have to add in with that a ticking clock, right? I think it is important for the administration to get good people into these offices, including Gigi Sohn, and it's important for them to get as many people into these offices as they can before November. Because we know things are going to, and the other thing they could do is just steal a line from Trump and appoint everyone as acting everything, all right? Like that's what he did. Even when you have the votes, you don't want to bother with it because people would look like idiots in the hearings. But the challenge here is you need to fill the ranks of these agencies with competence and talent, with the right values. And also, we've seen this on a number of other agencies, that people are getting punished for being too obviously competent, right? Like the problem with Gigi Sohn's nomination is it is too clear what she would do, like the good things she would do in that job. That says a lot about the sorry state of our politics today. And also with the clock going, count the votes now and figure out if you got them, because you need to get people into these jobs before the window closes.
There's another piece of timing that also matters in this. Even if you have the votes, you've got to have the votes at a time when the Senate is in session, mm-hmm. and Vice President Harris is in town.
Mhm.
Because if you have the votes, it's going to be 50+1, which means you need the vice president. And that's just a really limited number of days between now and November. It's a scheduling problem as well as a calendar problem.
It is. So if you make this a priority, then you can fix the scheduling problem, at least with the vice president.
Yes, you could make sure that the vice president was around, but that has all sorts of other repercussions. And it certainly isn't easy because now you've got to get the Senate to agree to do what the president of the United States says.
Mhm.
And regardless of who's in control, and this is also not a priority for Senator Schumer,
Mhm.
right? He's not going to bat for any of this. He's got other things that matter to him. It's just like the logistics and the priorities just aren't lining up. All right. Speaking of calendars and timing, we're at 35 minutes. So I think we are done for this episode. Plug your Substack and you've had some fun Twitter stuff. So plug the Twitter stuff.
I'm tweeting a lot these days as @DaveKarp. It's a lot of snarky takes about things like Elon Musk and Florida Republicans, and also children's programming, because, these are the things that occupy my day. And I am still blogging at Substack. I've got like 7 essays that I'm going to write over the course of the summer. All of them, I swear, are really good because I've been prepping them all school year when I was too busy teaching.
And I am at PLOGE, PLoge on Twitter. We're at peterloge.com/podcast. Watch the video and look at the links. My Twitter feed is some snarkiness and a whole lot of analysis of the firing of Hernan Losada, the most recent coach of DC United. So soccer nerds, tune on in. And no, you may not turn in your papers late.
I'm fine with it. Just ask.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.